Think of it, 8 decades after NATO was born from the trauma of war and the shadow of Soviet aggression, its very foundation, the dependable commitment of the United States, is now openly questioned, not by its adversaries, but by a returning US president who has mused more than once about pulling America out of the alliance altogether. This, then, is the starting point of Europe's quiet but urgent recalibration of its defence posture, a continent compelled to prepare for the contingency that the United States may no longer guarantee its security. What was once unthinkable is now a matter of informal but structured deliberation in London, Paris, Berlin, and across the Nordics. Since Trump's re-election, his administration has done little to reassure Europe that the US commitment to NATO is ironclad. On the contrary, his long-standing rhetoric questioning Article 5, demanding increasing spending, threatening withdrawal, has forced European capitals to confront the existential dilemma: how does Europe defend itself if the US walks away? According to the Financial Times, a plan is being developed to present to the US before the NATO leaders' summit in The Hague this June, and it envisages a managed transfer of military and financial responsibility from Washington to Europe over a 5 to 10-year window. Crucially, this is not NATO's dissolution, but a reshaping of its internal architecture led by the continent's largest military powers. The UK and France, historically the two nuclear-armed European members, are leading that initiative. Germany, for its part, has announced a €100 billion special fund to modernise the army and to modernise its defence. Poland is rapidly building what it hopes will be Europe's largest land army, and the Nordic countries, especially Sweden and Finland, are now integrated into NATO's northern defences, and their involvement in these conversations signals a growing appetite for continental cooperation. The areas targeted for European capability growth include integrated air and missile defence systems, strategic airlift and logistics, intelligence, surveillance and satellite coordination, deep fire capabilities, command and control systems, especially on NATO's eastern flank. And these are precisely the domains where the US has long shouldered the burden, with 80,000 to 100,000 American troops stationed across Europe and a nuclear umbrella extended through dual-capable aircraft. The US remains the indispensable partner, but if that partner becomes unreliable, Europe must have an answer, and it needs to happen fast. Let's not pretend this is purely a matter of military logistics. European people, the public, are ambivalent, if not outright sceptical. In Slovenia, a recent poll by the Mediana Institute showed broad support for NATO membership, around two-thirds in favour, but strong resistance to accelerated rearmament. Only 38% supported meeting or exceeding the 2% GDP threshold on defence. Two-thirds opposed Trump-style pressure for rapid increases. Yet paradoxically, there is strong support, again two-thirds, for closer European military cooperation, perhaps even a new pan-European alliance. In short, Europeans want to stay in NATO, but they want to do so on their own terms, not as junior partners bullied into militarization by Washington. And it's at this point that I think it's important to rethink NATO if necessary, or to rethink Europe if necessary, in terms of a defensive capacity. And that means I was doing an interview yesterday for Azerbaijani TV about the need to reconsider European defence from Ireland through to Istanbul. I'll play a bit of it here.
But one way forward would be to find a sort of semi-European union which might embrace Britain and might embrace Turkey, might embrace other countries, Albania and so on, who are being drawn into the European circle, and eventually Europe needs to acknowledge this.
Creating a European alternative to NATO is not only politically fraught, it's logistically daunting. And as Chatham House's Marion Mesmer has noted, NATO already has the infrastructure, the doctrines, the command structure, and replacing it would be akin to replacing the EU with a new trading bloc, an act of institutional vandalism and stupidity. Hence, the emerging strategy is not to discard NATO, but to strengthen its European pillar, making it viable even in the partial or total absence of US involvement. Still, trust is the central question. Can Europe trust the United States under Trump to abide by a managed withdrawal agreement should one be negotiated? Officials are divided. Some fear that merely discussing the contingency plan could accelerate the US disengagement. Others, perhaps more realistic, argue that there is no choice but to prepare. I think pulling Trump and America into the Commonwealth and at the same time managing the European pillar of NATO is probably the right way forward. Indeed, the very fact that these plans are being formulated reflects a sobering recognition that the US may be less interested in defending Europe than in pivoting to the Indo-Pacific, where it faces China's rising power. Europe is at last beginning to take seriously what Emmanuel Macron once called strategic autonomy. But autonomy is not the same as madness. The goal is not to eject the US from NATO, nor to defy it, but to de-risk the European security architecture from depending on a single capricious partner. And the plan to be presented to Washington before June's NATO summit will test not just Europe's credibility, but America's too. Can both sides of the Atlantic agree on a phased, adult rebalancing of responsibility? Or will this moment be remembered as the start of NATO's unravelling? For now, Europe is preparing not for rupture, but for resilience.